friends! So today we're going to talk a little bit about some techniques that I want to start using in practice that are going to help us train our minds. Okay, the mental aspect of sports is just as important as the physical side. A lot of times it's easy to see athletes that are putting in the grind at practice. You're seeing them hit the marks in the times that they need to, and they're progressing really, really well. But the minute that that's transformed onto a performance stage, so like going to a meet, for example, a lot of the stress, the pressures, the adrenaline, the intrusive thoughts, all those things really get to you. And so it's hard to be able to take physically what you can do and actually lay it out there because your mind is telling you otherwise. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a couple different things that we are going to do to reverse those effects and help us to become mentally resilient. All right, and the first thing that we're going to talk about with that is language. The way that you speak to yourself makes a world of a difference in your performance, okay? So we're going to talk about 4 different types of language today, okay? We've got proactive, positive, negative, and subtractive, okay? We're going to start with positive. So positive speech is anything that is, you know what positive is, it's upbeat, right? It's optimistic, saying good things. Positive language is language that is an adjective, so it's describing something. So for example, you'd say, I am a good jumper. Right, so you are describing what kind of jumper you are, and it's in a positive connotation, right? The word good. I'm a good jumper, okay? So negative is the exact opposite, is describing something but in a bad way, in a pessimistic way. I am a bad jumper, because you're describing what kind of jumper you are, and it is bad, and bad is a negative connotation to it, okay? So these things are pretty basic, and we say a lot of these things to ourselves. And always we want to be on the positive end of things. Okay? When we are getting into focusing on tasks, though, and developing our skill set, there is a broader span of language that has more detrimental effects to us. Okay? So we're going to start with the negative side. So beyond negative, the worst type of language that we can say to ourselves is called subtractive. So this is negative language that is using an action or using a verb. Okay? So saying something like, I will never become a good jumper, right? So this is now defining your ability to become a good jumper. And you're saying that I'm never going to be able to do that. That is subtractive language, okay? You're taking an action along with a negative connotation. This type of language is the most damaging to us, and this is the stuff that we want to avoid, okay? Now on the other end of the spectrum, proactive is now positive language that has an action used in it, right? So this would be something like, if I can nail the Hain technique, I'm going to become a great jumper, right? So you're giving yourself an actionable item. You want to work on, you want to nail the Hain technique, right? If I can learn to hang, I can become a great jumper. Or you're describing in a positive way what kind of jumper you can become, right? Becoming is an action word. Okay, so all of the language that we want to speak to ourselves should be proactive. Okay, this is when you're giving yourself something to actually do and something to work on, right? Your brain is constantly looking and searching for something to do. So when you're giving yourself language with an action, that's what it latches onto. That's why subtractive language is so negative and is so bad for your performance, is because your brain is latching onto that action because it wants to do something. So if we're going to say an action word, it needs to be with a positive connotation. So we've always got to be searching for the next thing that we can be working on and the next thing that we can improve, okay? So this concept of having proactive language is something that I want you to keep in mind today, all right? And we are going to implement this through the use of a journal. Okay, let me find, there's my red marker. Okay, so we're going to be starting a journal, and this journal is going to be a way to keep track of your progress, to help you maintain a proactive mindset, and to help you to be more focused in competition, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is to start with a goal, okay? Start with a season goal. Something you want to accomplish over the course of the next couple months, okay? You never, ever, ever want to jump, run, throw, etc., without a purpose. Every single time that you are taking an action, every single time that you are working on something in practice, there needs to be a reason for it. Okay? We never want to do anything blindly. There always needs to be a purpose to everything that we do. Again, your brain wants to latch onto that action. It needs a reason to be active. Okay? So we're going to start with a season goal. We have to have something to focus on. All right? So let's say that, for example, I want to jump 16 feet by the end of the season. That is my goal. And let's say that right now, I'm jumping, let's say I'm a 14.3 jumper. And I want to get to 16. Okay? That's a little bit more than 1.5 feet. It's a good distance. It's going to require some work, but it's doable. It's something that we can pull off. Okay? So we've got where we want to be. And if you, especially for my newer jumpers and athletes, if you have no idea what you want to accomplish this season, then we can help you find that. We could shoot for a goal to qualify for varsity, to qualify for the BYU invite, to qualify for state, those kinds of things. And being able to set a goal will be a little bit easier once we do time trials and jump trials, so you can kind of have a starting point to reference, okay? So just be patient with me. So for the sake of today, so that you can get a feel for how this journal works, just pick a goal, okay? Because we're just going to practice how to write this journal out, okay? So we're going to stick with that 16 goal, okay? That is going to be my goal for the season, all right? Where, oh, here it is. Okay. I'm going to put 16 right here. 16 feet, okay? The first thing that we want to do is we want to break this down into more manageable parts, okay? Just shooting for 16 right now as a 14.3 jumper is quite a lot. And so if I'm not reaching that goal when I'm going to meets on the weekly, I don't feel a sense of accomplishment. In fact, I feel the opposite. I feel like a failure. That's when I start feeling subtractive, like my actions are not good enough, like I'm never going to be good enough. Okay, so what we need to do is break this down into more manageable parts, or what we call objectives, okay? Objectives are what you are searching for each week, okay? So let's think about this first, okay? So let's say, well, in order to get to 16 feet, what do I have to do first? I have to get a distance that is shorter than that, right? So let's drop it down to, let's say 15.9, right? I have to hit 15.9 at some point before I can hit 16, right? That's just the way the world works, okay? Before I can hit 15.9, I have to hit 15.6, okay? And so on and so forth. So you'll see, I want you to break down your goal into smaller, more manageable pieces, okay? Now, how far you break these apart is going to depend on you and depend on what you want to do, okay? Obviously, if you are in a sprint, right, you're going to be counting down maybe by the tenths of a second is how little you want to drop it. If you're going into a distance event, then maybe you can go 2 to 3 each time, right? For jump, same thing. In high jump, you probably want your increments to be about 2 inches because that's how much the bar is moved up each time. For long jump, you probably want to make it somewhere in the 3-inch to 4-inch range because those are very small increments that are easily manageable and doable to get in a 1 to 2 week time frame, okay? So you'll see now that I've got my objective board written out. Okay, right now I'm jumping 14.3, remember? So my very first objective that I need to hit and focus on is getting to 14.6, okay? So this is objective number 1. Once we hit 1, we go to 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we're going up the ladder here until we can hit our season goal, okay? So I'm gonna show you what you do with that now. So now you've got that written down, save it. I'm erasing it here. You don't erase yours, you save yours. Okay? So 16 foot is my overall goal, but this week's objective is I need to get to 14.6. Okay? So it's important to have both of them in mind, to recognize that hitting 14.6 is a part of reaching my 16-foot goal. Okay? So here's our objective here. What we're going to be doing with this objective is we are going to now break this down into cues. A cue is something that is really quick, short, brief, that is easy to remember, that is going to help you stay focused and on track for your objective. Okay? Now, each time we write an objective, I always want you to have 2 to 3 items on your cue list. Okay, here's why. If we have less than 2, if we don't have anything in our brain to focus on, or if we only have one thing in our brain to focus on, that means that there's a lot of room left over for these outside influences to come in and penetrate your mind. Okay, this is where distractions come into play. This is where doubt comes into play. This is where intimidation comes into play, right? This is when you start getting overwhelmed with the sense of outside influences, okay? So having 2 little things to focus on allows those to penetrate and come in, okay? If we have something more than 3, if we have a bunch listed down here, then we start having the exact opposite problem, where now there's too much to focus on and your brain cannot spend adequate amounts of attention on each of those cues. And so what happens is some cues get dropped off, or some things get forgotten, or it just all gets mixed up in your brain, and again, you're just left with this fog and you still cannot focus, okay? So we always want to stay in this 2 to 3 range. Right here is having at least that to focus on. It's just enough to keep your brain occupied, but not too much to overwhelm it, okay? So, our cues. All of your cues, when you write them down, should be proactive, okay? So I don't want to see something like don't take off on your toes, okay? What happens when we use the word don't is that your brain doesn't process it. It really doesn't. So what happens if you say don't take off on your toes? Your brain does not hear this, and what it hears is take off on your toes. Okay? So this is what we want to avoid. This is what we want to not do. Okay? So we need to make sure that everything that we say and that we use for our cues is proactive. All right? So we need to think of 3 actionable items that are going to help us reach this objective here. Okay? Now, your cues can be very specific to your event or very specific to the goal that you want to set. Okay? So I can write cues that have to deal with my technique in long jump. Again, very specific, very technical. Or they can deal with things that are just going to help me generically with my mentality or with my athleticism. Okay, so you could write a goal about getting enough water or getting enough sleep. Or if you tend to find that you are very negative at practice or that you are beating yourself down, then maybe you could write a goal about using positive speech. Okay, so I want you to think about just 3 things that you can do to help you with this objective right now. Okay, so I'm going to use the last example I just took. Is I've got a problem if I take off on my toes, but coach wants me to take off flat-footed. But I don't want to say don't take off on my toes, so I need to take that and now turn it into something proactive, right? So instead of don't take off on my toes, maybe we could say take off flat-footed, okay? So now there's no negative connotation here, and it's something actionable, something that my brain can latch onto, right? Okay, so that's the first one, is I want to take off flat-footed, okay? Number 2, let's say, let's say that I don't drive my knees very well when I take off. Because I'm taking off on my toes, I'm not able to then bring my knee up, or I'm not focusing on bringing my knee up very well on the takeoff. And long jump is crucial that you have a hard, fast knee drive to get you popping up into the air, okay? So let's say that I need to have a hard knee drive. That's something that I want to work on. Let's also say that I'm bad about drinking water, so I just want to have a goal or a cue that I need to hydrate, okay? So now I've got the 3 things that I want to focus on, okay? However, we're going to make an adjustment to these, all right? So do you remember what I said about how you need to have just a little bit here? Do you remember what let me rephrase that. Do you remember what I said about how if you have more than 3 cues, your brain starts getting fuzzy and it just can't quite process very well? Well, the same thing goes with your cues. You want to keep your cues right about the range of 3 words or less. You can, five words or less is okay, but 3 words or less is even better. Okay, so something that will work as like a reminder to you, right? Like an alarm going off in your head when you hear the word hydrate. What do you think of? Okay, so let's start with this top one. Take off flat-footed, okay? This is a little bit long. I want to condense this just a tad, okay? So I already know that I want to take off, or that this is for the takeoff. So what I'm going to do I'm going to put flat foot, okay? I know in my brain that this is referencing a takeoff, okay? So for somebody else, you might pick something different that works for you, but for me, I know that this is referring to takeoff, so I'm going to go with flat foot, okay? Hard knee drive, okay? We want to make this, hard is an adjective, knee is what the adjective is working towards, but drive here is the action word. So I'm going to turn this into drive. Okay, so I know that when I say the word drive, I'm meaning I gotta drive that knee up. I gotta get that fast motion there. Okay, and hydrate is only a single word, so I'm gonna leave it as is. All right, so now you've got your 3 cues for the week. Okay. You know what? I changed my mind. You might change your mind too, and that's okay. It takes time to process and figure out what cues work for you. Okay. Take off is 1 word. It's an idea, right? So I'm gonna say flat takeoff. Okay. So this is giving me something actionable to do is to do the takeoff flat. Okay. Something actionable to do, drive the knee. Something actionable to do, hydrate. Okay. So now these are the 3 things that I'm focusing on while we are working on this objective, okay? Objectives are gonna last anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. We can push them to 3. Ideally though, we want our objectives to be something that we can get within a 2-week time frame, okay? So this is what I want you to reference every single day before practice is, okay, today, flat takeoff, drive, hydrate. Those are the 3 things that I need to be working on that's gonna get me to this objective, okay? So at the end of every single day, we are going to then evaluate how well we did, okay? Here's how the evaluation is going to go. We're going to use something called a 3-to-1 rule, and I hope that you guys can see this from that camera. Should be able to, okay? We're going to use, I'm just going to put evaluation so we know what we're looking at here, okay? The 3-to-1 rule means that you write down 3 things that went well during the day and 1 thing that you need to work on and improve, okay? Now, again for the evaluation, just like we did for our cues over here, is you want what things you did well to be written really concise, really condense it down, okay? So let's say, for example, thinking about the flat takeoff. That's something that I was working on today. I really made an effort for it. I wasn't perfect, right? There were still sometimes I was taking off with my toes, but I had a couple of good jumps that were flat, okay? So I'm just gonna write down that cue exactly because that's something that I did well on, okay? Let's say that throughout the day today and throughout practice, I really was focusing on getting a lot of water in my system and I felt hydrated. I felt really good today, okay? So I did a lot of good hydration, okay? Now, you can also, when you're evaluating, they don't have to line up with each of these exactly. They can still be something that helps relate to what these goals are, all right? So let's say that for today, I didn't really work on my drive very much. However, I was very optimistic at practice. I really had an upbeat attitude. I was resilient. I was getting up and trying again after I fell. You know, I really just had a good attitude about my workout session and about the training that I put in, okay? So I'm going to put good attitude. Wasn't a perfect day, but I did a really good job about walking away feeling good from it, okay? So now we've got to go on to the one thing that we need to improve. Again, here we want to be careful that we don't use subtractive language, okay? We want to make sure that we're still staying proactive. So we want to avoid here saying, I didn't drive my knee, right? Rather, we want to turn this into something positive and actionable that I can now work on, that my brain can latch on to, okay? So this could be something like, if I didn't work on this at all and that's something I need to focus on, I could put drive. I could just straight up write down that I didn't do that cue. Or you can relate it to something else, right? So I said earlier that not all of my takeoffs were flat, but I still was taking off on my toes, but I had some good ones here or there. So maybe something else that I want to work on is I could write consistency, right? Trying to make each of my takeoffs the same. Or instead of consistency, you could put consistent takeoff. Okay? You don't want to have more than one theme here though, so I would choose between one of these two, which one you want to write down, okay? I'm going to go with consistent takeoff, okay? Because that was something that I was more focusing on today. Drive was kind of just outside of my brain. And if I didn't work on this today, that's okay. We'll have other days in practice that we're working on things and I can put more focus and emphasis into drive. But right now, I feel it's more important for me to be more consistent in my takeoff. I hope that makes sense, right? So that's what I'm going to be focusing on, okay? So this evaluation that we're doing here, what this allows us to do is, one, to keep us positive, to keep us seeing all of these good things that you are putting into your training session. It's helping you to see that even if you walk away feeling like you had a bad day, you can realize like, wait, I actually did some really good things. It actually was a good training session. Now, don't get me wrong. Some days are going to be harder than others to come up with your evaluation and to come up with what things went well and what things didn't, okay? But this keeps us positive and proactive. The proactive part comes from down here, what we want to change. When we tell ourselves things that we did bad or we did poorly, that's when the subtractive thoughts come into our brain, and that's when they start eating at us. So when we can flip it around to something that we can actually work on, that we can do, that has a positive connotation to it, being more consistent with the takeoff, right? This is helping our brain to latch on and say like, okay, I've got a goal, let's go get him. I know what I'm working on next time. And this helps you to maintain a cycle of really healthy training and of really healthy evaluating, okay? So when we do this at the end of every single day, this is what I want you to do. If it was the day that you were working with me on technique, you're gonna report this to me before you take off, okay? If it was a day where you weren't working with me, so let's say that it was a sprints day, right? You just stayed with the sprinters the whole time. Then when we meet up together to do our core and our stretching, this is something that I want you to report to a teammate, okay? So having an accountability buddy makes it so that you are more likely to do this and more likely to have a positive attitude about yourself and of the things that you are doing well, okay? So we do this every single day. At the end of the week, so right now we're still early enough that we're not into competition yet, right? So the end of the week is going to be like Saturday or Sunday. You choose, whichever floats your boat. When we get later into the season and we start getting more into competition, it'll be at the end of competition, which will most likely be a Saturday night, okay? What you're going to be doing is now looking at this objective. If you achieved your objective, then great. Then we can just slide on up to the next one, which from 14.6, my next objective was to go to 14.9, okay? If I didn't achieve this objective, then let's keep it here, okay? Regardless of whether you have the same objective or a different objective, each week you are going to write new cues, okay? Now, not all of your cues need to be different. If you feel like you are super, super struggling to get water in and you're trying to find a system that works, then still keep that one of your cues, right? If it's something that you need to work on more, then let's do it. However, if you feel like, yeah, I have a good system in place, I know when I'm taking a sip, I know how much I'm drinking, like I feel really good about that, then why do we need to keep working on it, right? Let's fill this in with something else that we can work on. Okay, so each week you're going to be reevaluating your cues that are going to help you get to your objective. Okay, so you can keep some the same or you can change them up according to what you feel that you need. Through this pattern, guys, of having this proactive mindset of being able to keep track of our goals and our objectives, keeping track of our progress, and keeping track of tasks ahead that we want to focus on, this is how we are going to help you to become mental champions, right? Your coaches are going to take care of you physically. We are going to get you there. This, however, this is going to be up to you. This is effort that you have to be willing to put in because we can only take you so far. So if we can make a habit of working this journal and using it to our benefit, then you guys are going to become mentally resilient. You're going to get on the line when you're ready to jump or when you're ready to run, and you're going to be ready to go. And you're going to feel so good. And you're going to say, yes, today is my day. Okay, as I'm getting up to jump, flat takeoff, drive, here we go. And you're going to have something to focus on and work on, and you're just going to feel so much better about your efforts, and you're going to see a lot of progress. And we're just going to be jumping over those objectives to get you where you want to be by the end of the season. Okay? So whether it be a physical journal or whether it be digital, I don't care. I want you to find a place to write down and keep track of all of these things. Okay? Let's do this together. Let's go be state champions. Woohoo!